Everybody, Buffin here. Thanks for watching. I've been doing some videos about Jesus in the Bible throwing the money changers out of the temple. And I got to the scripture about it in John, and I was looking for it in the rest of the Bible for other versions of it in the other three Gospels. And I ended up just looking it up on the internet to find out where they were. And no wonder, because in John, it happens at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And then in the other books, it happens 3 years later, like a week before he's crucified, almost as if this is why he was crucified, because he threw the money changers out of the temple. So just to repeat the John version that I already read earlier, because in his version it happens first. Now I read some people's stuff about this on the internet, and some of them say that maybe Jesus chased the money changers out of the temple twice. That seems kind of unlikely, more like they changed the story for one reason or another. And then most of them seem to presume, well, John would have changed the story for effect. Although, if the other writers had changed the story for effect and put it close to why he got killed, like to say, hey, if you do this, you might get killed for it. Well, hard to say who would have changed it for effect. Or, if anybody considers that maybe it did happen in the beginning. What stuck out to me in John's version is that and this is how it goes, and the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple. Apparently, this is the only version that he makes the whip. He drove them all out of the temple. He drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep, and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables. So John's version is very clear that he drove the people out. And the reason I emphasize this is because one of the things I read was someone saying that, he wants to look at Jesus as completely nonviolent. I'm a nonviolent person. I like to think of Jesus as nonviolent. This is an exception. This is an episode of violence that Jesus performs. And he's trying to claim, that author was trying to claim that Jesus only, if you try hard enough to interpret the Greek a certain way, you can see that Jesus only drove the animals out and just rebuked the people. Now, I did think it was interesting. He poured all their changers' money out, poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables. And said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. Now, that author, who said he didn't believe Jesus had acted violently against the humans, said, if he had driven the people out, how does he tell the dove sellers? When I read it, I just thought it meant he drove the oxen and sheep and their sellers out with the whips. The dove sellers, just practically, if you're driving these people out with whips and they've got like baskets of doves and you're trying to get them to get the doves out too, it doesn't work. Like the animals, you're herding the animals and people out of the temple. The doves are in cages or whatever. You can't just whip them out. If you whip the people out, the doves are still there or whatever. You're asking the person to remove the doves. Now, also, it made me think, is that a difference of offense? The whole reason this conversation, this whole analogy came up in my mind is from a conversation about congressmen and how some congressmen are doing some really evil things and showing, they're really terrible and should be punished for that. And the idea that, well, the other ones are just as bad. And my thought is, no, some of them are taking it way too far in this Trump direction. And so in that case, while Jesus is punishing these people, maybe the dove sellers aren't as great an offense, or just for practical purposes, you can't drive them out. But the idea that there could be a difference of offense, a difference of level of offense, that, you're part of this too. You're complacent in the selling of animals here, but yours isn't as bad as these other ones. Maybe you like birds, something like that. But that was interesting to me that there was a difference. But to me, the difference was he drove these people out and then he spoke to these people. Now, that same author that said he doesn't like the violence says there's no way he could have driven everyone out because the temple is too big. And another article that seemed even a little more thoughtful said with all the guards in the temple, there's no way Jesus could have addressed this whole thing to more than one small group of the merchants. He couldn't have driven all the merchants out because the guards would have stopped him. He could have only driven out a small group to send a message or send a signal. Now, the other thing that pointed out that I thought was pretty interesting was that Caiaphas, the high priest, had a feud with the is it Sanhedrin? I'm sorry if I forgot what they're called, but they had started with an S, but they had a monopoly on the market outside the temple. So Caiaphas, the high priest, said, "No, we're not letting you. I'm going to let some people sell stuff in here to break up their monopoly." So like this political thing between the highest powered people in the Jewish community. And that author of that article was saying Jesus was sending a message to them. It wasn't so much, "Hey, I'm punishing you sellers." I'm sending a message to the people who are allowing these sales to go on, to the high priest, to the priesthood of Judaism. Now, that was the John version that in my previous video, I didn't really get into those details because I got so wrapped up in the response. And the first thing that really surprised me about the response is that all they say to him was, well, let me finish the story. He threw him out. He said to them that sold the doves, "Take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise." And his disciples remembered that it was written, "The zeal of thine house has eaten me up." Then answered the Jews and said unto him, "What sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things?" So when Jesus does this at the beginning of his ministry, or before doing anything else really, when this is his coming out, I mean, he does a little bit more. He went to a wedding and changed water into wine. He'd done a few miracles. Maybe he'd already even fed 5,000 people. He'd been gaining some fame, but this isn't like at the end of all these things he'd done. The first thing he's done in John is cleanse the temple of these money changers. And the response of the Jews in the place is to say, "You seem to be of God." And this is why I don't think that even that thoughtful article that said, "Hey, this place is too big," or "There's too many guards here," from him driving everybody else out, is taking the Bible at its word. When he drove them out, he drove them out. Maybe he drove everybody out of the temple. Everybody out. And that's not impossible. Somebody starts acting crazy, turning over temples, letting the money scatter and roll across the floor, and is just still going after people with his whip. Which, again, weapons weren't allowed, so he had to fashion the whip in the temple. According to that article, weapons aren't allowed there. Although there was also an area that was under pains of death. The Gentiles can't go past there. Only Jews, or certain Jews, not the wise. It's complicated and extensive, the layers of stuff. But it's also a very large complex, 300-something meters, 400 meters across. So for him to drive everybody out would be shocking, but that's the whole point, is that it could be that shocking, that he drove everybody out. Yeah, even though there were guards, he drove them out. He assumed this role of power was going, and caused a stampede, drove everybody out. So, and then, spoke to him outside or whatever. I can't see that driving a few people out would not gain attention. So it seems to me like, yeah, probably drove everybody out, just like they said. And probably didn't do it twice. But how they position it in the story and how much of the story they tell. Because for my money, John was telling more of the story. He told more of the response, told more of the, or that was a more intriguing response, that the Jews were saying, "Well, hey, you must have a message. You must be from God, because you're doing what we all kind of sense needed to be done." Now let's go to Mark. Well, let's go to Matthew, so I remember exactly where it is in Matthew. 21:12, which I thought was an interesting number. "And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves." So it's like he kicked the chairs out from under the people that sold doves and overthrew the tables where they were making the money. "And he said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves," which is apparently callbacks to previous prophets. "And the blind and the lame came to the temple and healed him. And when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things he did, and the children crying in the temple, saying, Hosanna, the Son of David, they were sore displeased." They didn't like what the children were singing about him. They didn't like the miracles. It didn't mention specifically that they didn't like him throwing out the thing. But I guess that was also a political debate between the scribes on one side and the scribes that were aligned with the high priest. Maybe that wasn't what they complained about. Or maybe they kind of, were acknowledging, oh, yeah, we have corrupted this area. Or they were, if they were previously empowered by the merchants all being outside. I don't think Jesus was choosing sides politically, but if it served their political side, they wouldn't make that criticism. They'd be like, yeah, Caiaphas, the high priest, was wrong to let them in there in the first place, whatever. But, maybe Caiaphas is the one calling some shots later on regarding his arrest and crucifixion. And he said to them, and said unto him, hearest thou what these say? Meaning the kids. Don't you hear these kids calling you son of David, or Hosanna, the son of David? And Jesus saith unto them, yea, have ye never read, out of the mouth of babes and sucklings thou hast perfected praise? Because kids say beautiful things. And he left them and went out of the city into Bethany and lodged there. Doesn't really talk about the grumbling. It then says he saw the fig tree and found... See, this is what's interesting to me about Matthew, is before he goes in, he sees a fig tree. Where is it? Maybe that's the other version. Maybe that's actually Mark. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon but leaves only, and said unto it, let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And presently the fig tree withered away. Presently. So it is in Matthew that all happens right after the temple sequence. The reason I bring it up is because in Mark, and Peter, calling to remember it, said unto him, Master, behold the fig tree which thou hast withered away. Okay, so before that, and seeing a fig tree afar off. Okay, so, sorry, Mark 11:12. And on the morrow, when they were come from Bethany, he was hungry, Jesus. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves. For the time of figs was not yet. So it's like, so they just weren't ripe, or it wasn't even the season where you should have had figs. He was just like, I want figs. The tree doesn't have figs. And Jesus answered and said unto it, no man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. Then he goes into the temple, throws them out. I'll go ahead and read it to you. Mark chapter 11, verse 15. And they came to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry any vessel through the temple. So another detail there. Can't carry anything through here. And he taught, saying unto them, is it not written, my house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves? And the scribes and chief and priests heard it, and sought how they might destroy him. So a very distinctly different response. Again, both of these accounts are saying this is near, a few days before they do crucify Jesus. For they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his doctrine. So he's making a big splash. He's really impressing everybody with what he's saying. And when even was come, he went out of the city. And in the morning, as they passed by, he saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou hast cursedest is withered away. And Jesus answered him, saying, have faith in God. So, when he cursed the fig tree, the story is told in Matthew. In Mark, it's told, but the chasing out of the temple is in the middle of the fig tree story. It's kind of saying that has no fruit. Now, unfortunately, this whole consumer capitalist corruption of Christianity, of this religion, has taken place for continue to have 2,000 years of growth, and it's led to what we have today with all of its problems. It needs to be reformed. One good thing about the thing I read is that it's saying, hey, the message you're supposed to take away from this is that we're always reforming. Now, it didn't seem to have enough self-criticism to appreciate how the church needs to reform today, because it was a sermon being delivered to a church. But that I appreciated that. It had criticism for prosperity gospel. I appreciated that. There's some churches on the right side of this. I just don't feel they've gone far enough to the right side to show the way for everybody to follow. But Jesus is doing that. That's what we're called. They're called to do, and what we're all called to do if we listen to this. And Peter, calling to remembrance, saith to him, Master, Paul, the fig tree which thou cursedst is withered away. And Jesus answering him said to him, Have faith in God. I didn't read this part before, but I'm reading it now. I got time on this thing, I think. For verily I say unto you, that whoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that these things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. And when ye stand praying, forgive, if ye have aught against any, that your Father also, which is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father, which is in heaven, forgive you your trespasses. So if you can have and make anything, which I just spoke against prosperity gospel, I have to go against what's completely wrong about basically the idea that if you can have and want anything, what you want is cars and money. If you can have and want anything, then you don't want to hold a grudge. You don't want to have, hey, I want this so I can have this over this other person. Like, if you haven't want anything, the freedom to have the best comes from wanting the best for everyone. And that's all through Jesus' message. He's always like, call the poor, like help everybody. So that they do challenge him. I guess in this account, they're saying they're trying to destroy him as soon as he does this in the temple. There's people who are out to get him after he did that in the temple. In John and in Matthew, it seems kind of more like there's people who are like, hey, cool. Like, we get it. Like, is there more? And that's interesting. Now we'll go to Luke and see if I can find it. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said to him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. Meaning, hey, you can stop these people from talking, but all of nature is part of this, and will call out and will testify to what we're saying. That's just really cool. But yeah, I didn't find the part. Let's see what I'm looking for. They ask him about the authority, so it usually happens before the authority. When they ask him authority. He throws them out so quick. It's hard to find the part. The people start destroying. He went to the temple and began to cast out them that sold therein. So it is in Luke 19:45. He went to the temple, began to cast out them that sold therein, and them that bought, saying unto them, It is written, My house is the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. And he taught daily in the temple. But the chief priests and scribes, the chief priests and the scribes and the chief of the people sought to destroy him, and could not find what they might do, for all the people were very attentive to hear him. So one of the guys said, hey, this was a good charge they could lay on him since he did this. But it says they could not find what they could do. Maybe they just couldn't get at him, but this was part of what's precipitated them wanting to get at him. I want to take it back just a little bit. Those don't seem to mention the fig tree, for instance, but this one says they want to destroy him. Matthew mentions the fig tree, but doesn't say that they want to destroy him. Mark mentions the fig tree and says they do want to destroy him. John says it happened 3 years earlier, and that people seem to be like, hey, you're cool. What's the rest of the story? And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, That's why I noticed that and thought, well, that's probably the fact that he wept over the city as he approached probably is going to affect, how he enters the temple. Saying, if this is Luke chapter 19, verse 42, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. Which to me seems to say, if you could know how beautiful you could be if things were at peace, if you were doing things right, if we made things right, how beautiful this city could be. And it makes him sad that it's not that way. For the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, destroy the temple, and thy children within thee, and they shall not, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knowest not the time of thy visitation. So all of that's pretty like predicting the doom of the temple. When he says, thou knowest not the time of thy visitation, what does that mean? I'm just going to go on my intuition that this is the communion of spirit, the communion with God that the holy city, the temple itself, is supposed to represent, is missed out. Thou knowest not the time of thy visitation. Maybe not that it only happens at a certain time. Oh, we missed it. We missed our appointment. But a nature of time, like a quality of time that you can't get into when you're corrupted with this material stuff, or with this consumeristic, I should say, preying on people's stuff. Because the sales are preying on people in some way. One of the authors says maybe they're just doing a necessary service. They're not actually profiting too much. That's not the complaint. One of the authors says, by calling them den of thieves, Jesus probably felt like these people are profiting off the poor. It's the same situation we have currently in America. We have a system that claims it's going to give you a little piece of the health care you need, as long as you leave the corporate structure in place, instead of challenging it and saying, we don't need health insurance at all. We just need health care. We don't need insurance. We don't need all this junk. We just need health care. We need socialized health care. We need universal health care. They're going to try to piece off this little stuff to us. They're the money changers, right? We need to chase them out. So, and they'll seek to destroy the people that say that, whatever. Like, we literally have God on our side, literally have these powers to call these things into being, and to do it in practical ways too. I like to speak from the magical, mystical perspective, and to people that like to understand that. But obviously, not believing in things, there's still things we can do. Even if we can't believe in the highest things, there's still things we can do. Although, from what I'm reading, I haven't read the Bible this much in a long time. I've just been trying to read around this story. It is all about the belief, and the idea that having stronger and greater belief makes greater things happen. So obviously, the agenda of the bad guys is to keep people from being able to believe in things, to suppress all belief. And you can break out of that. Just choose something to believe in. Choose something good to believe in and start believing in it. I think I read all the accounts now. I mean, there's going to be, and it all falls into the context, but some of the most interesting things to me in reading this and reading about this is that it happens in different times in two different accounts. One at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and then the other three years later, a week before they kill him. And another that one person saying, there's this axis mundi at the end of one of these articles. There's this idea of the channel between the divine and the human. And all these cultures have it. The Egyptians in their obelisk, and the Native Americans in their totem pole, and and even the Capitol building, or the Washington Monument, that these connecting obelisks that serve that belief function. And, according to that Christian author, preacher, whatever it was, Jesus was the new one for everybody, where instead of man reaching up to God, God had reached down to man and sent his son or whatever. I just thought it was interesting that after making all those parallels, you don't have to replace all of them with one thing. Like, it's really cool that everybody has that there's always been this connection. But another thing I thought was interesting reading these statements of Jesus is he even implies like these doors of heaven, stairs to heaven, like this difference, this travel between heaven and earth. And at the same time seems to be the one who, to me, the most promotes the idea of heaven being here. Like, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is here upon us, or we're already there. It's already intermingled. So it's interesting that, to me, there's a contrast between more of a worldly, like, hey, I'm telling you about it because you think about heaven being up there, like, in the attic, but it really is here. But he does use that language as if it's up there sometimes. So it's just interesting to see those details, and just interesting to see all this stuff. But I guess my major point for making these videos at all is to say that it's true that there's a reform to be going on. That's what the Spirit is all about. Reform, transformation, progress, and evolution towards the greater good. There's a great good future, a better future, that the more aware and more spiritual we become, and it doesn't mean always the things that people think spiritual means, but the more spiritual and aware we become, the faster we get to that future. The more of that future we realize all the time. And things can progress really exponentially. So, like, you can make breakthroughs, things can be like so much different. So we need to know what we're going for and be going for it. And it is, it's pretty clear-cut stuff that's been there. It's just actually putting it into practice and following it from the Christian tradition, from the words of Jesus. It's like, make sure they're poor and everybody's taken care of. Take care of the poor. Keep the focus on people, not profits. Like, we have a lot of cliches about it now that mean the same thing, and we just need to empower them with belief. Because, as he says, people that believe in signs, you can do all these different signs and say things cleverly, but you have to connect to the people's true beliefs. And the other thing is, I think you're seeing things that are within everyone. So the more we all engage, the more it all comes out. And I'm sure I'll say things that people are like, you're so off base and stuff. So we can talk about it. And the more we can talk about it, the more we'll figure out. So thanks so much for listening, and do what you can to chase the corruption out of your own spiritual space. Because while I do see this happening today, I do see like the need for this story to be told and to repeat itself today, which is why I was praising the traders that socked the stock market, and the Black Lives Matter protesters that are saying, hey, we need to actually care about people and make changes, and the environmental protesters that are doing the same thing. Everybody that's on the side of the good, pressuring for more and better and faster, and at the same time slowing some things down or ending some things, but more good faster. It all comes together, and it's all from the same place. And while people are trained and programmed into being bitter against these things, when you actually hear the message, when it finally gets through somehow in a way that you can understand, then in the context that you can understand, then it makes perfect sense, and you can come around to it. And so that's one reason I wanted to make this, is because to me, chasing the money changers of the temple has everything to do with Black Lives Matter, with reforming a system that's gone corrupt, that has a good ideal, that can be a good thing, the temple, the connection to the divine, the holy city. These can be good things, but only if it's actually holy. So I've enjoyed studying this. I want to do more of this. This has been great. And let me know other things I should be looking into, or things we could talk about. Right now, I feel like I just want to do some creative work. I want to make up some of my own stories and do some of my own stories. I want to do another video about the Umbrella Academy, the show I've been watching based on a comic book, and I want to make my own comic book. So I got to get to work. I got a lot of books I'm writing, a lot of stuff I'm doing that, and I want to make some more music for Fox and our band too. But I got to get some of it done to enable me to do even more things. So wish me luck, and good luck to you as well in all your endeavors. And chase them out. Chase out the bad stuff. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, it's not just in the world; it's in ourselves. So if we make consider ourselves not just the inner sanctum of ourselves, but all of ourselves a holy temple, and chase out the bad stuff, we'll be good. I haven't smoked a cigarette in 2 weeks now. So do that. If you haven't quit smoking cigarettes, man, it's a great difference to make. Quit smoking cigarettes. But any of these things, get bad thoughts out, get bad feelings out, cleanse yourself of these things that have corrupted and dragged us down. And we're going to go far. We're going to do it all together. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.